Hello, Jamf Nation. Welcome to the presentation about automating the Mac lifecycle from Tedium to Triumph with Jamf Pro, Okta, and GitHub Actions. And let me welcome our presenters, Sam Mills and Jerry Morrison.
All right, JNUC 2025, how we doing? Man, it's good to see you guys. Thank you all so much. We're thrilled to be here. This is an honor to speak to you guys this morning. And we're just wanting to say we're super appreciative that you guys chose to come sit with us. And hear about what we have to say about automating the Mac lifecycle from Tedium to Triumph with Jamf Pro, Okta, and GitHub Actions. We didn't feel like there was quite enough words up there, so we decided to add a couple more, and Slack and IBM Notifier. So my name is Jerry Morrison, and I am a senior endpoint engineer at Jack Henry & Associates.
And I am Sam Mills, and I lead the endpoint engineering team for Jack Henry.
So real quick, a little bit about Jack Henry. I'm going to give you the LinkedIn bio version real quick. I'm going to read this for you, but we're a financial technology services company. At its core, Jack Henry is built on relationships, and every interaction we have strengthens the connections that shape our work, our communities, and economy in profound ways. Our mission is to empower community financial institutions with modern, best-in-class digital banking and payment solutions designed to enhance and streamline the user experience. That was a mouthful. At the end of the day, Jack Henry's motto is work hard, play hard, do the right thing. And so really, at its core, all the things we're going to talk about today, like that's the culture of Jack Henry, and it's going to be reflected in a lot of the work we're going to go through for you. So I'm going to start off with a question. Who here spends way too much time on manual Mac lifecycle? Yeah, I'd say a good chunk of the room, right? If you are managing Mac fleets, chances are you're familiar with the following problems. Okay, manual refreshes and replacements, so calculating useful life cycles and getting users to actually return those old devices. It's a nightmare. Speaking of, the offboarding nightmare, securely locking devices when users leave the company, and then just data drudgery. Manually managing metadata and forecasting and all this, it's just, manual processes are no fun. So we kind of had a unique challenge at Jack Henry, and as our Mac fleet grew, managing the device lifecycle, it became complex and unreasonable, and we had kind of these challenges that were presented to us. We had disparate data. Like we were often cross-referencing two different ticketing systems with inventory and then data from Jamf Pro, and this led to inaccuracies and contradictions. The where's that Mac quest? When we don't know where a Mac is after refresh, pinpointing a device's true life cycle, it becomes time-consuming and frustrating. And then scaling. Manual processes just don't scale with a growing organization. And all of these things led to, this was a full-time job for one team member. Like, it was a lot to handle. So we decided to put on our engineering caps and come up with a solution to automate this so that we weren't manually doing this. We decided to build a robust automation engine with Jamf Pro right in the middle. So we deeply integrate Jamf Pro and GitHub Actions. So we leverage Jamf Pro's API capability and GitHub Actions. Those talk to each other. And then we use Okta for some identity-driven triggers and smart notifications both on device and in Slack. So at the center of it all you see is Jamf. That's our engine. That's driving all this. And we interact with its APIs, and we are able to do some really, really cool things. Some key takeaways from today. I would like for you guys to have a conceptual understanding of how to leverage the Jamf Pro API for advanced automations. We'll give you some insights into some effective integration patterns with orchestration tools like GitHub Actions and identity providers like Okta. We're going to give you some examples of both Slack and on-device notifications that enhance our user experience. And hopefully we're going to inspire you guys to take what we've done here and build some cool stuff in your environment. I just want to make a quick note. This is a case study from our environment. We use the tools that we had at our disposal, but this is not a tutorial necessarily. It's a map. We're here to inspire you to take what we do here, and you can kind of plug this in with whatever tools that you have at your disposal. So this is how we did it, but it could be different for you. So today, we're through all of these different workflows that we're going to talk about, you're going to see a pattern pop up. And this is through these several discrete workflows, we're going to have this orchestration pattern. And it's all going to be related to the device lifecycle. And you're going to see this through everything we talk about today. So we have, we'll detect some state. We'll use Jamf Pro. We'll evaluate some logic with GitHub Actions. We're going to act on that logic, whether that's sending some communication to the API, we're going to send some notifications, et cetera. We're going to confirm outcomes, and then we're going to repeat that. But before we dive into kind of how we started down this process, I want to show you what we used to do. This is our actual documentation. And we had one person that did this every time we went through the refresh cycle. And this is actual documentation. One person would perform these steps manually, no seatbelt, no brakes, just vibes and mild panic usually. But yeah, it took a full time. It took time, and it was literally a full-time position for one person. So I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Sam, and he's going to tell you how we got started.
So the first thing that we chose to tackle here was our refresh and replacement, how people were going to get their new computers. And a little snapshot of the old way, this was entirely manual and reactive. A couple of times a year, we'd pull some reports out of Jamf Pro. We'd import those into Excel, sort by setup date and model year, and we'd identify all of our eligible devices to be replaced. So we were looking for things that were end of life or in use for more than 3 years. And then we'd go about contacting each user. We'd gather their delivery information, their address. We would create individual tickets on the user's behalf, oftentimes doing this in 2 separate ticketing systems, and then we'd coordinate all the shipping and receiving with a separate department within the company. Now you can see the problem here. This is wildly inefficient. And it's probably also a good time to mention that we are a fully remote and geographically distributed endpoint engineering team. We do not have an office. We do not touch the hardware. So we're relying entirely on our partners in the office in order to ship and receive everything. So whatever solution we came up with, we had to take this limitation into account. And that's why we settled on a user-centered self-service approach using data that we already had within Jamf Pro. I'll talk a little bit about how we did that, calling back to the orchestration pattern that Jerry introduced earlier. We start with this Jamf Pro smart group. We detect all of the eligible devices for refresh in that smart group, and then we use a script running in GitHub Actions to iterate through those eligible devices. We identify the owner of the device and match that up with a Slack ID. And then we act using a Slack bot to send a direct message to the user, inviting them to create their own refresh ticket. We then confirm our results and send a report to an internal Slack channel, and we repeat this on a monthly basis. So I'm going to dig into the first step in our pattern here, detecting the state. We chose to use an extension attribute called last setup date, and this reads the creation on the Apple setup done file. That file is created directly after the setup assistant, and we found that it got us the most accurate date of when a device first came into service. And then we've got a smart group called eligible for refresh. And this includes all the computers where their last setup date was more than, say, 3 years ago. And we've also included devices that they're end of their life in this group. Now, extension attributes and smart groups are easy enough, but for our team, we hadn't really worked with Slack bots yet. So we had to take a little bit of a detour here. What we needed was a Slack bot that could send a direct message to a user. And this requires interacting with the Slack API, which means we needed to securely authenticate with a token. Slack has great guides on all of this. We followed this exact guide linked here, and we had something at least usable up and running within about a day. Then we set to formatting those messages, used another tool from Slack called Block Kit Builder, and this allowed us to get a message preview of exactly what the message was going to look like when it was delivered to the user, and then we could copy and paste that JSON out for use in our script. So with that kind of technicality figured out, we can get back to our workflow. And with just a Slack URL, a bot token, and a user's email, we are able to send messaging to users. We gather that email out of Jamf. We use that to look up the user ID and open a private conversation with the user, and then we send our pre-formatted message over to them. And this is an example of what the user might receive. We're inviting them to get a new Mac. We're giving them some instructions on how to do that. We give them a link to the actual ticket queue where they can create it. And we've even given them some instructions on what to do when they get that new computer. And then here's an example of what we might get in our internal Slack channel, letting us know who received that first message so that we are still in the loop and informed about what's going on in our environment. Now, at this point, we have dynamically identified everyone that's eligible for a refresh, and we sent them a Slack message inviting them to submit a ticket. But we needed a way to run this automatically on a schedule. So this is where GitHub Actions comes into the picture. We started with a really basic GitHub action to run our script, but we pretty immediately ran into a problem. So we had to take a second detour here. Our script was running great on Mac OS, where we had developed it, but it was not running on Ubuntu within a GitHub action. So we found that we had two main issues to deal with. The first one was dealing with dates, and the second one was dealing with the XML that came out of the Jamf Pro API. And we found that through a couple of functions and dependencies, we could deal with both of these problems. We ended up installing gdate on our Mac OS clients, which is the same date binary that comes with Ubuntu. And then we wanted to install our XML utilities on the Ubuntu runner. And we found that using XMLint with the XML XPath flag got us the same functionality across both OSs. So through this process, we were able to continue running these scripts locally on our Mac OS devices or running them on a schedule within GitHub Actions. Putting that all together, this is a simplified example of what the GitHub Actions YAML file would look like. You can see the first thing we do is run this on a schedule. It runs on Ubuntu. It checks out our repository. It installs our dependency on XML utilities, and then it runs our script. So what our new Mac lifecycle looks like now is a new Mac gets enrolled. We record the setup date. We wait for a predefined refresh period, and then we notify the user that they're eligible to get a refresh. At this point, the user can submit their own refresh ticket, and we've done a little bit of user education here to let them know that they could submit this refresh ticket on their own timeline whenever they're ready. And then our partners ship the device, and the process starts over. We're missing our notes here, if you could. The impact here is just that we have zero manual effort for our team. We have fewer old and unsupported devices in the fleet. We have users in control of their own refresh timeline, and putting the user in control actually improved employee satisfaction with this whole process. So after we automated this, we found that we had created a brand new problem for us. Oftentimes, we didn't know that a new Mac was enrolled, or really that this refresh existed at all until it showed up in Jamf Pro. So we needed to find a way to reconcile that information and make sure that we knew where our refreshes were and what was going on in the environment. So the old way we used to do this, again, just click ops, updating everything by hand. We would pull information out of our ticking and inventory system. We would identify any of those computers that were replaced in Jamf Pro, and then we had two extension attributes that we acted on. We set the refreshed extension attribute to true, and we record the refresh date of this refresh. Now, again, this doesn't scale, and it's prone to error. So we decided to once again leverage the data that we already had within Jamf Pro. We wanted to automate that metadata population, write those EAs for us so that we didn't have to go in and do the clicking. One more look at our orchestration pattern here. We started with a Jamf Pro API query to iterate through all the users in our Jamf Pro tenant. And we were looking to detect users that had more than one Mac assigned. Or more accurately, we were looking for users with exactly 2 Macs assigned. And then we had a script running in GitHub Actions to evaluate some logic here and compare the model year and the enrollment date for those 2 devices assigned to a user. And then we would select the refreshed Mac and write those EAs back to Jamf Pro, setting the refresh to true and recording the date. We confirm our results and send a report to our internal Slack channel, and we repeat this on a weekly basis. Now, you may be asking, how did we identify the appropriate Mac in order to update those extension attributes? Well, we relied on one core assumption. If the older model year was enrolled chronologically earlier in time, then it is a refreshed Mac. And here's a report that we would get in our internal Slack channel when this automation runs. You can see that we've found exactly 2 devices assigned to a user. And that first device has a model year of 2020, enrolled in the year 2022. Our second device, newer model year, and newer setup date. So as long as our assumption holds, we can take that action at the top and properly mark the refresh device. And here's where we identified a pretty cool opportunity. We could calculate lifespans. We had these extension attributes already in place for the setup date and the refresh date. So we could get the delta between those dates right down to the day, which meant that we were able to dump a report and find the actual median lifespan of any given model in our specific environment. And we found that this data could actually be as specific as we wanted it to be. So if purchasing wanted to know how long an M1 MacBook Pro lasts when you give it to a developer versus a support staff, we're able to find that information for them. The impact here is that we've got more accurate data about device status. We have data-driven lifespan insights to inform our future purchasing and our budget forecasting. We've got fewer overlooked devices that may pose a security threat hanging out in our fleet. And very crucially, it also enabled us to develop the next workflow, which Jerry's going to talk about now.
All right, now that we have given someone a brand new Mac, how are we going to get those machines back? And so we rely on what we call reclamation notifications. So we're going to do some on-device notifications. We all struggle with notification fatigue. I'm sure we're getting notifications all day, every day on all of our devices. So we're going to give these notifications just a little bit of a bite. And we'll talk about how we're going to do that. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about our old way. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, this was my least favorite part of our refresh cycle that we used to do, is having to chase people down and beg for them to set up their new machine and send the old machine back to us. It just was a time sink, and honestly, it isn't fun to hound people. And so it's also contrary to our internal culture is that we want to work with our coworkers and not against them. So the fact that we're having to chase them down and beg for them to send their device back just feels like it was pestering and didn't feel good to the team. So our solution that we came up with, we want to automate that communication, and we want to automate the expectations so that the user knows without a doubt their machine is going to be locked if they do not send it back to us and will not be useful. So we're going to go back to that orchestration pattern. We're going to do some targeted on-device notifications. So we're going to, we have a smart group in Jamf Pro to detect computers that have been refreshed and are still checking in. We're going to evaluate how long it's been since that device was refreshed, and then we're going to act by sending the appropriate notification to a device for that user. The great thing about this is there's no extra tools really required. This is all the detect, evaluate, and act portions. This was all done within Jamf Pro. This is exactly what Jamf Pro is made for. This is why we love it so much. Here's a little look at what these notifications look like. So for the first 30 days, we used non-disruptive toast style. And if you click on that option there, the user can say, remind me later. Or if they want to go ahead and get a shipping label, they can click that, and it'll take them to the ticketing system. They'll open up a ticket to return some equipment, and they'll get a shipping label. Easy peasy, done deal. So after 30 days, it becomes a pop-up with a countdown to when their device is going to be locked. And then after 60 days, we're going to throw in a checkbox. We work with a lot of software engineers, and the majority of our fleet is software engineers. And so we know that switching to a new machine takes time and is kind of a process. And so we want to give them plenty of time. We want to be gracious. But once we get to that 90-day mark, that's where we're going to start giving it some teeth. And what are those teeth? I'm glad that somebody asked. I'm going to tell you. Here's the teeth. So we're going to go back to this orchestration pattern. We're going to use a Jamf Pro Smart Group. It's going to detect devices refreshed more than 90 days ago. We have a script running in GitHub Actions that will evaluate some logic. It'll check and see a lock status on that machine, and if it needs to be locked, it'll lock it, and it'll generate the appropriate codes for us using the Jamf Pro API. And then we're going to confirm some results, and we're going to send both a lock command to the machine that needs to be locked, but we're also going to send a report to an internal Slack channel that we see. And I'll show you here. We're going to repeat that daily. I'm going to show you here kind of what that looks like. This is the report that we get within our internal Slack channel. So it tells us all of the information that we're going to need, what action was taken, and it's going to give us that lock code for future reference if we need it. And so we're going to look, this is kind of that refreshed Mac lifecycle. If you look at the flow chart from earlier, so that the refresh reconciliation process, that's where the old Mac gets marked as refreshed, and then it kicks off that whole process. But here's the thing, we're really hoping that the users return the device long before we get to that part where it gets locked. The impact of this is clear expectations, and we have enforced compliance. So the users, they know exactly the return timeline. They know the expectations that their device is going to be locked if they don't return it within 90 days. And that means we have more Macs that are returned sooner, and they're not just sitting out there in an insecure state. And we don't have to chase them down manually, which is my favorite part of this whole process. There's one more piece of this reclamation process, in which we call this the offboarding nightmare. So like, what happens when a user leaves the company or if they get terminated? So we used to, if it was a termination, we used to have to rely on a manager to reach out to us, tell us there was a termination that day, and we would have to manually send lock commands and keep track of those lock codes. And it's just messy, and anything like that, it gets messy. So that's where Okta kind of stepped in and saved the day for us. We used an Okta workflow. So what is an Okta workflow? If you're not familiar, it's a no-code automation platform, and it works directly with the Jamf API to give us some extended functionality. And in our case, it was to, when a user was flagged as either terminated or if their account in Okta was locked, it would automatically lock the machine. This was the only part of the stack of this puzzle that we actually don't control. We don't have any control over Okta, so we had to work with a Jack Henry Okta engineer to set up this workflow. Jamf workflows, they're kind of outside of the scope of this, but for reference, we did use a great talk that Stephen Short gave at JNUC 2022 called Automate Jamf Using Okta Workflows, and he talks about the 20-minute mark. He talks about using Okta and locking devices. We followed that to a T, and it was really cool. So I'm going to hand it back over to Sam, and he's going to talk a little bit about device retention. That's what you need, not this.
So at this point, we've automated how our users are getting new computers. We have ensured that we're getting those old computers back or otherwise locked and secured them. But we did have another problem to solve here. Our Jamf Pro instance was becoming bloated with stale device records, and this made our reports inaccurate and wasted some licensing. So we wanted to clean that up. We started out doing this manually, more click ops. We would check extension attributes that we've talked about earlier, and we would try to identify devices that were refreshed or from departed users and differentiate those from what should be an active device. If we found an active device that wasn't checking in, we'd reach out to the user directly. If we found devices in those other categories, we would send some lock commands, unmanage the device, or remove it entirely from Jamf Pro, depending on what category it fell into. Problem here, this doesn't scale. It leads to inaccuracies and contradictions, and these manual processes are just not fun. So our solution was to automate this just like we did everything else. And we chose to automate this based on a predefined retention policy that we had within the company. So I'm going to start by talking about the retention policy just a little bit. This is an oversimplification, but you can see we have 4 categories. The first one is for devices that are 1 month stale, or in other words, they have not contacted Jamf Pro in over a month. If these devices should be active, meaning they're not refreshed, they're not departed users, we consider that non-compliant, and they must be investigated to reestablish communication. After 3 months of no contact, we're going to queue up a lock command. After 6 months, we're going to queue up an unmanaged command. And after 1 year of being stale within Jamf Pro, we delete those records entirely. Now, I want to make 2 notes. The first one is to do with pending lock commands. We do not unmanage or delete a device with a pending lock command. We wait for that command to be delivered, or maybe we've otherwise confirmed that the company is in possession of that computer before it gets removed. The other note I want to make is that ServiceNow is our CMDB. This is our source of truth for device inventory, not Jamf Pro. We use Jamf to manage the device, and it is not our inventory system, so we can get away with removing things pretty aggressively within Jamf. One last look at our orchestration pattern. We start with Jamf Pro Advanced Computer Searches to detect the devices in those 4 categories that I just talked about. 1 search for each category. And then we use a script running in GitHub Actions once again to create an action plan for each one of those 4 categories. And then we use either a Slack bot or a Jamf Pro API call to act and execute that action plan. We confirm our results and send that to an internal Slack channel, and we repeat this every month. Now, you'll remember the first category I talked about is for a stale device that really ought to be active. And what we found was that more often than not, those devices would begin communicating again after a simple reboot, Either that or the device was sitting in a drawer or on a desk somewhere, and we needed the user to turn it on and let it check in. So we started delivering this notification, letting folks know they have a stale device. This is the exact device we're talking about, and we want them to reboot it, update it, turn it on, and we give them some consequences of what's going to happen if they don't do that. And what we saw was an 80% reduction in stale devices month over month, and this was with no other interventions. We're not redeploying the Jamf framework, we're not doing anything else special here, we're just telling the user, get your computer online or reboot it. A couple examples of Slack notifications that we'll get. If a user receives the notification on that previous slide, we will get this to our internal Slack channel, letting us know who was notified. I've also included a little error report here. If the user can't be found in Slack, we will be notified of that so we can find another mode of contact. Our second category here for devices that have not contacted in 3 months, we queue up that lock command. After 6 months, we queue up the unmanaged command in addition to the lock. And then after a year, we're able to remove those devices out of our Jamf Pro instance. The impact here is that we've eliminated all of that manual cleanup. We have more accurate reporting for our fleet, we've reduced our licensing cost, we've improved our compliance, and we're being a lot more proactive about the way that we manage the fleet. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Jerry to wrap things up.
All right, so we've talked a lot about the Tedium, so let's talk a little bit about the Triumph part. We saved about 24 plus hours every month. That was around 300 hours every year, and that's nearly 2 full work months freed up from manual processes that we were no longer having to do. Here's a quick summary of kind of how we tackled that. By using Jamf Pro as a state engine to feed GitHub Actions and Slack to communicate results, we were able to automate all of the work that you see up here. We eliminated hours of manual tasks each week, all while we improved our reporting, security, and we reduced costs. So I'm just going to leave you with one question, is what could your team build using Jamf Pro as a state engine? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And are there any questions from the audience? Okay.
So we have a similar, right now we're in the middle of some manual stuff. Eric over here has done a great job of automating some of it, and this is some great information. Awesome. One of the questions I have is, let's say a computer, for whatever reason, you need to wipe the computer, re-enroll it into Jamf. Well, now you're, if I remember correctly, you're using the start date, that hidden file, for the enrollment date. It's now got a new date, but you may have a device that's going to go past that 3 years of service. Or so are you, and you mentioned ServiceNow, are you then also comparing information to the ServiceNow, like EOL date or something along those lines, to make sure that someone isn't stuck with a device for 5 years at that point?
Yeah, that's an edge case that we don't deal with a lot with wiped devices like that, but it is something where we are writing that information back to ServiceNow. We're aware of all the end-of-life devices. And a user is always able to submit their refresh ticket early or contact us about that. So that's an edge case that's sort of out of the scope of what we're able to deal with if a device needed to be completely wiped and start over. That date would get overridden.
Okay, yeah, because we see that sometimes with our sales teams and stuff like that, where they travel, something happens, they don't. Yeah, various breaks, we'll say, break fix situations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please raise your hand. Okay.
What do you do with the edge case scenarios where you don't want to sink your teeth down due to the fact that an engineer says your timeline doesn't befit our schedule? I need 120 days, not 90 days. How do you halt your workflow and not lock the computer?
So there was one slide there where you may have seen an extension given part. I don't know if we can go back to that slide, but that is something we've dealt with an extension attribute in Jamf Pro. So us on our team can go in and give an extension by writing an EA to a number of days. And then when the automation runs, it will read that value and it will allow that user to have an extended date for when that device gets locked.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Let's go to the bottom.
So to build on that last question, my mind kind of goes to some more edge cases where you may have a colleague out on a primary caregiver or on parental leave, and they just got refreshed, but you don't want that clock to start just yet. Would that same extension value apply in those situations?
Yes. Okay. In those situations, we would basically follow that same playbook of writing the extension and kind of pre-planning for how long that leave was going to be.
And to bolt onto that question, for cases where you either have a set period of refresh or do you base it off of device compatibility pending a new OS release? Like, what is your methodology around that, or where does your policy lie for that?
Could you rephrase the question?
Oh, sure. So in some cases, we don't follow a set number of years. We kind of say, okay, well, can the device persist a bit longer? But if it's going to hit a hard OS limitation for a next upgrade, you say, okay, well, we have to upgrade now. We have to refresh because of that. Or is it more just a set year?
Okay, so yeah, with something like that where it's basically end of life at that point. It doesn't support the newest operating system. The user would get a slightly different message letting them know that they must refresh the device by a certain date because that's what we've determined as the end of life for that computer.
Thank you.
How do you handle users that that have multiple devices and are supposed to have multiple devices?
Great question.
Yeah.
We have a user group in Jamf Pro for users that are approved for multiple devices. So that's going to be where we're iterating through every user, looking for users with multiple devices. We can exclude people like on our team that have multiple testers, people on a product team that might have multiple Macs for a specific reason. We add them into that Jamf Pro group, and then they're excluded from the requirement for only one Mac.
We have kicked off our employee choice program, and I'm wondering if you have anything on the Windows side, if they're swapping to a Mac for automation.
Could you repeat that question? I had a hard time hearing it.
We kicked off our employee choice program, so we have a lot of people switching from Windows to Macs. I'm wondering if you have any automation on that, reclaiming the Windows devices.
We don't have any hand in Windows devices. We don't have anything specific to do with that. Otherwise, the process is kind of the same. I mean, with getting a Mac, like that whole setup process is exactly the same. But they would typically just work with the corporate help desk to return their Windows machine. It's kind of outside of our control there. Cool.
Yeah, everything that we do, everything in scope of our team is Mac-based. So we don't really deal with the Windows environment like that.
Finally, gotcha.
Thank you. Non-technical question. How did you convince your company to allow you to lock machines on those specific dates?
We really just did it.
And you're still employed.
we didn't really ask. We didn't really ask. So.
Yeah. So there is a policy that
Yeah.
backs this. There is a
Yes.
policy that says you must return your device within 90 days. So at that point, we were able to tell the users, this is the rule, and we're enforcing it.
So.
Happy for you.
Hi, this was a great talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm curious to know, like, what were the considerations between choosing to use, like, GitHub Actions versus, like, Okta workflows? Because, like, I play a lot with Okta workflows, and as I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh, well, I can replace GitHub Actions and have Okta workflows do some of this execution of some of these things. So did you, how did you decide if you wanted to leverage workflows versus GitHub Actions?
The big part of that is that we do not have any management or access into Okta workflows. That is not something our team has any visibility in. We had to work with an Okta engineer on the corporate Jack Henry side to even implement one Okta workflow. And so just the amount of back and forth that would need was an automatic non-starter. So we try to go with the tools that we have control and visibility into. And so, yeah.
I think I would add, too, that additional Okta workflows are an additional cost as well. So that's something that played into the decision.
Thank you.
Thanks. It's been enjoyable. Is there a reason that you chose to use the setup date instead of like the warranty expires or, something along those lines, since, as we've heard, we know that setup date can change for various reasons?
Yeah, I think that the reason we chose that was really because we already had an extension attribute reading it, and I think that you're right. There may be a more appropriate date that we could pull out, and I think that's specific to anyone's environment. What kind of data do you have on that, and what's most useful?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is actually trying to get that warranty end date from an Apple API or something, which just doesn't seem to be readily available.
Yeah, which I think is a new feature this year, to be able to hit Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager and pull that warranty information
I'll have
out.
to see, because I looked in the GSX route, and I'm just having problems with our Apple
That feels
rep
like a
and getting
nightmare.
that full access to pull down that data, because we have all these problems, like you're mentioning, of people all around the world that we have a hard time getting laptops from.
Hey guys, sorry, quick question, and sorry if I didn't understood this correctly, but to get the setup date, you read the Apple setup done, but once that Mac is refreshed, how do you act from Git into Jamf Pro again to put the refresh date with a script that just puts a file or a payload with a new refresh date?
So for the refresh date, we are looking at when the new Mac was set up, and the date that that new Mac got enrolled in Jamf becomes the refresh date for the old Mac. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
You guys are full of questions. I love it. Thank you.
How are you guys handling the data migration piece of your users going from their old device to the new device during this refresh period? And then also, were you leveraging any scripts during like a pre-stage enrollment to set some of these extension attributes?
So for moving to a new Mac, we are utilizing IBM's data shift. That's kind of a new thing we've started doing, and we've seen some good results from that. I forgot the second part of the question there.
If you were using any scripts during the enrollment complete stage to update extension attributes or demark the previous machine that was transferred from to the new one.
Okay, so yeah, that is not happening during setup right now. It's all happening within the GitHub action. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Any more questions? Please raise your hands. Oh.
Hi, I have a small questions. There were quite some questions about edge cases earlier, and it was interesting to hear on how you remediated that. I was wondering if you've experienced a lot of edge cases and how easy it was to adapt to it and to adapt your process accordingly.
It's very rare, honestly, for these edge cases. Once we know which device is refreshed or we know that a user has departed, that's easily dealt with. We also have an edge case for a loaner device where we would get a notification, hey, this doesn't line up. We have a older device that was enrolled more recently. That would trigger a different notification for us saying that's probably not a refresh, and that's where some manual action comes in. So we would go ahead and look at that and see, oh, this is probably a loaner device, and then we could set an extension attribute for a loaner and let the automation deal with it that way.
Thank you. Good question. Okay, I think we.
Yeah.
Oh, we got one more squeezing in at the last minute.
Any of the newer Jamf infrastructure as a code features that were just announced this week that you guys are looking into?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely looking into that. I mean, we went to the Terraform talk this morning. That was interesting. We're gonna be leveraging because we're an engineering team. We're part of like all the GitOps, DevOps teams. That's kind of where we fall in our org. So it makes a lot of sense for us to kind of start looking at those tools. But yes, to answer your question, yeah.
So thank you for answering all of the questions.
Yes.
And let's give guys a
Thank
big
you
applause.
guys so much.